Direct ink drawing is a wonderful art form to practice. Although it can seem scary, the thought of not being able to remove any lines that we make, the fact that every mark is permanent gives us, ironically, a great freedom because we might as well just go for it. There's no point being precious. There's no point being overly timid because really we're drawing for the overall effect. And it's equally a mistake to think that we're better off saving it for simple subjects in case we make a mistake. Complex subjects full of lots of detail, are actually a wonderful choice for direct ink drawing because it gives us so much to play with. It gives us so much to look at. It gives us so much room to hide lines that aren't quite right. And the effect when we finish is very satisfying. So let me talk you through a direct ink drawing of a really complex, detailed subject and hopefully encourage you to have a go at drawing something similar yourself. When drawing a complex and very detailed scene, such as this view over the rooftops of the Swiss city of Bern, it's important to understand a few things. And the main one is that the impact of the drawing is going to be the overall effect rather than any one part. And so in looking at our reference, the question is, what will be the overall impact of this scene that I want to capture? Because that's what I have to make sure I pay attention to and not get swept up in all the things I could think about drawing such a detailed scene. And when I look at this, the thing that really stands out is this snaking line of rooftops. That, in my mind, is the predominant visual element in this drawing. And so I want to capture that. I want to make sure when I draw that I pay particular attention to all of these rooftops and to the line that they follow to get this nice reverse S-shaped bend to it. The other thing that really strikes me is simply the contrast between these trees and the architecture. And so I want to make sure I capture that, and also these dark shadows in here as well, because they help highlight some of the architecture as well. Because overall, it's a relatively low contrast scene. It was a grey day when I took the photo, and so even though I've lightened it, there aren't strong shadows being cast. So I'm not going to use tone in this drawing. I've also decided I will just use line, and I'll do a minimal amount of hatching to indicate some of the darker shadows. So let's start drawing. As always, it's important to carefully choose where we start our drawing, because the things we draw first will be important in determining the scale of our drawing and therefore whether it will fit and look appropriate on the paper we've got. But also, when we reference the rest of the drawing, it will be off the parts that we've drawn first, so we want to be able to draw them accurately. So I choose this corner of the S-bend where there is less obscuring the details of this building so that I can take more care with drawing them. And also because the roof line goes off in two directions from this point. And again, it will give me more to reference. The particularly important thing with these roofs is to get the foreshortening correct. We don't want the S to be too long or too short. We want to get that nice snaky feel. And so where the ridgeline of the individual building roofs are is important in defining the S. So I want to keep that accurate, but I also want to allow for all the chimneys, which of course interrupt that ridgeline often, depending on the perspective with which we're looking at that particular building. So I both need to commit to angles and to lines with my roofs, but also to leave spaces and gaps where I can put the chimneys, because they're a very important part of this scene. They are, if you like, the street furniture of this scene. The architectural details that we can see that we don't normally see. So we have to draw fairly loose for that reason. We also need to leave room for all the dormer windows, which are basically on every single window, and the fact that they can connect at odd angles with the sloping pitch of the roofs as well. The important thing is simply to go at a good steady pace, roof by roof, paying attention to that snake in S, referencing the angles that we've drawn lines at. It's not important any one particular roof, and that's the important thing. If I make a mistake, I shouldn't draw attention to it by trying to overly correct it. Instead, what I want to do is simply make sure it sits nice and happily with the buildings around it, because it will be the overall effect. I shouldn't get too tangled up in detail, and one of the decisions I will have to make is just how much detail to draw. Or if I try and draw some things, I might find that I've got too many lines too close together and they all merge, and it ends up becoming a black blob that just looks uncertain and awkward. So there are parts, even with these closer sections, that I need to simplify when I draw. And so now I'm moving up further on the S shape of these roofs. And the other thing to realize is that when I'm drawing windows and dormers and roofs closer to me, I can put more detail. And certainly when they're further away, I need to work at having less detail because I want to make them look further away. Now, these trees are a really important part of this scene because they supply contrast to the architectural forms, and that helps us to read the architectural S shape better because there are parts where we don't have to worry about it. And the shadows on the left side of the trees also help create both contrast but also give it a nice silhouette. And silhouettes are always important in drawings. They are always visual focal points, and therefore we need to preserve them and use them, and even at times exaggerate them for the sake of our drawing. And so this tree down the bottom is a much looser tree, which in lots of ways makes it a bit trickier to draw. So I really just want to define at this point the scope of the tree so that I don't draw buildings where I want tree to be. And that's an important thing to do, to preserve areas where you need to have a little bit more care. And then it's just finishing this building closest. With this closest building, we need to make sure that our windows here are the largest windows we draw. Again, that's the sort of detail that counts in a panoramic scene such as this. Things such as windows, which tend to be a standard size, need to get smaller as they get further away. It's not just the foreshortening of the width, but it's the height that we need to keep adjusting as things move into the distance. I'm using a 0.3 pen for these buildings that are in this S-shaped snake closest to us. I'm partly doing that so that I can use a finer pen for the buildings behind, and that will give the effect of these buildings being closer to us, but will also simply help them stand out, which will exaggerate the S shape of the roofs, which visually is one of the attractive things about this scene. A very light touch with these windows and these buildings now that are becoming some distance away. It's often tempting with trees to rush those areas or to somehow see them as less important or different. Every part of our drawing is just as important as every other part. It doesn't mean we apply the same feel or touch to our line work or our detail, but we think about every part as carefully as every other part. Again, another front corner lets me draw in greater detail than I will be drawing in the rest of the scene. So I want to just create that feeling of closer with what I do. Because there are so many repeated elements in the rooftops, the angles, the splits where the dormers come through, the little pitched roofs of the dormers, because of all of this, they become easier to draw because we get so much practice. So I now switch to a 0.2 fine liner pen, and I'm going to use this for the rest of the buildings that are behind this snaking S-shaped street of buildings that we've been drawing up till now. And it's not just a lighter line I want to use, but I want to have a lighter touch with the detail. And as I move further back in this more distant section, I will draw less and less details. I'll draw less and less complete buildings, and I will just be suggesting roof lines with angles of lines and with chimneys that get smaller and smaller. It can be easy in a complex scene such as this to lose track of where we're at. You can see me holding my finger on various parts of the reference photo just to help me orient myself more quickly, because it was very easy to get lost. Again, in the distance, everything becomes more and more compressed, and it's important to capture this because that will give a sense of scale of the buildings stretching away into the distance, which is a very important part of the overall effect of this drawing. And now I complete the last element, which is this tree in the foreground and just the hint of buildings through it. I want to draw it with a lighter feel than the heavy dense canopies of the other trees. And now it's just finishing the little bits that are still left. And then my drawing is done. And I will post this drawing, this reference photo, onto my YouTube community page. And if you want to print off a copy and have a go at drawing this scene yourself, please do. And if you post it on Instagram, please tag me so I can have a look at it. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Drawing freehand in ink can feel intimidating. Don't let the fact that you can't erase any lines stop you from giving it a go, and particularly from tackling some quite complicated subjects. Sometimes they can actually be easier than simple subjects because there's so many places you can hide mistakes. Give it a go, and I hope you have a lot of fun in trying freehand drawing of complex subjects. I'll see you next time. Bye.